Hello and welcome to the 2021 Wildfire Season Outlook. This was recorded March the 25th of 2021. My name is Tom Bird. I am the Fire Weather Program Manager and Incident Meteorologist from the National Weather Service office in El Paso, Santa Teresa. All right, before we go forward and look at the outlook, let's take a look back at last year. And we're going to use 5 slides with these maps that you see here in the upper left. One of those maps is a representation of temperature ranks, and the other one with the greens is a representation of precipitation ranks. You'll notice in each state there will be a number. The maps will be larger on the next slides. And that number corresponds to how that state ranked against its period of record. So we're not ranking states against each other. Just within each state there's 126 years of record. So if you see 126, that means that state had the highest ranking for that year. So for example, on the left hand side with the orange map, the New Mexico and Arizona back in 2017 had 126, meaning it was the hottest as you rank that 2017 against all the other years of record for that state. It has nothing to do with other states surrounding it. You look at the precipitation side, the green map, you see you drop an 85 for New Mexico. And so you look on the right hand side, so that's where 85 ended up landing on the ranking between driest and wettest. So when you're looking at these numbers, you're not ranking against other states, you're just ranking that state against 125 years of that state's records. And so where that number falls tells you if you were warmer than normal, cooler than normal, wetter than normal, or drier than normal. So let's go forward. And I'm going to break this up into basically seasons. So January, February, March of last year to start the year. You'll notice on the left hand side, New Mexico had a 107. That's the average would be right around 65. So 107 is on the high side, so above average temperatures for this period last year. And if you look down in the bottom, you see the inset maps. That's the 2019 ranking, so you can kind of get a 2-year running by looking at this. On the right hand side, 98 for the precipitation. That also comes above that 65 middle value. And basically what a 65 would be means you have as many years that were wetter as you had drier than that year. But 98 here is higher than that, so it's above average wet year. So we move on now to April, May, and June. So this is typically our fire season here. And you see that New Mexico went up to 120 on the left-hand side, which means that there were only 6 years in the period of record for New Mexico that were warmer than what we saw last year for this period. You can contrast that with 2019 down the bottom left, where we were just about right on average. On the right-hand side now, looking at the precipitation, you can see that we went down to a 4 in New Mexico, meaning quite dry, much below average, and meaning only 3 years in the period of record of 126 years were drier than what we saw last year for our last year's spring fire season. Now we move on to what's typically monsoon months across the Southwest. And what you'll notice on the left-hand side is New Mexico 124, meaning only 2 years of record were warmer than last year. And you can see just to our west in Arizona, California, Nevada, they all had the highest number possible, meaning they had a record high temperature period. On the right hand side, you can see that we're still way down low in those single digits with a 5 across New Mexico, much below average precipitation through this period. This is when we're supposed to see half of our annual average across most of the state, so we really fell short of precipitation last year for our monsoon. You can see Arizona and Utah had record dry periods for them, so they were the driest they've ever been in 126 years. Okay, we move on now to our fall and going into early winter. And you can see on the left we continued much above average for our temperatures at 117. And on the right hand side, 19, still well below what the median year average would be, so we're below average again. And we continued way below average over in Arizona and California. You notice the previous year we had a wet season during this post-monsoonal early fall season, but this year we were quite dry. Now if we look at the year in full, New Mexico and Arizona there on the left had 125 ranking, meaning only 1 year has been warmer than it was last year. So last year was the second warmest year we've had on record across those two states. And on the right hand side you can see Arizona had its second driest year ever. We had here in New Mexico our fourth driest year ever. So now let's look at month by month rankings for the state of New Mexico as a whole, and that's what you're looking at here. So January through December, each one of those dots represents a month, and you can see that dashed red line in the center would be our average or median amount, our temperature, and you can see that for every month we pretty much ranged either above average, much above average, and even had the record warmest for August, the second warmest for November. So the entire year, start to finish, was above average, and most of it was much above average. So it was a very warm year last year. As we just showed you before, it was the second warmest for New Mexico. On the precipitation side of things for the year, you can see, if you remember that first chart it showed you, we had 98 on the precip across our part of the woods. And that was because of February and March were pretty wet months relative to normal. But you look at every month beyond that, and we were below average to much below average, with the second driest August ever on record. So it was a pretty dry year after we got through March, where we had above normal precipitation. And what happened over the course of the year, looking back to last January, this is drought, and this is the percentage of the area of New Mexico in each one of these drought categories, and we'll go into more detail on this on a latter slide here coming up shortly. But about 50% of the state last January was above normal dryness, with a little bit of drought, about 30% of the state in drought. You can see now 100% of the state is in drought as we move through December into this year, and now a full over half of the state is in exceptional drought, which is the worst category that they have. So if you just want to look at month by month precipitation across the region, and this is percent of normal, so where you see reds, oranges, those are below normal areas, and where you see the blues and greens and purples, those are above normal areas. So it's easy to see where the rain fell and where it didn't. Wherever you see blue across the area in February and March, that's where we had above normal rainfall. And if you look at the rest of the months on this chart, it's pretty much below normal for most of to the last 6 months. And again, even worse, especially as you go west into Arizona and east into the southeast plains of New Mexico and far west Texas. So pretty dry year in general. So this is what happened with drought through the year. This is the drought evolution. On the left is last year about this time. You can see New Mexico was pretty much at normal. The southern half, the northern half had abnormally dry, and only a small area of moderate and severe drought. But if you look now on the right hand side, just last week, March, you can see most of the state, well, all the state is in drought. A very large portion of it is in extreme and exceptional drought. And if you just want to get a big picture look at what the contiguous U.S. and Alaska looks like, that's the current drought across the entirety of the United States right there. So we like to look at drought class change, and so your drought can go from none to exceptional. That would be a 5-class change. Or if it improved from exceptional to none, that would also be a 5-class change. So you look at these colors again. The greens are where an area that was in drought got out of drought or improved their drought. You look in the oranges and browns, that's where an area that wasn't in drought moved into drought. And the bigger the number, the darker the color, the worse it got. So over much of New Mexico, you're looking at 3, 4, and 5-class degradation on that scale there in the upper right. Just an in close look with the counties on it, so you can kind of see how it looks like across the counties. So we do the outlook for drought, and I know we're basically through March now on the 29th if you're viewing it then. But this is what they thought we'd see across the United States with drought persisting in the brown for the entirety of New Mexico and all the Four Corner states basically. And if you want to look out further, this goes to June 30th now. So as we're well into and getting towards the end of fire season, you can see they have no indication whatsoever that we'll have drought improvement or removal across areas. So just a persistent drought to extend through fire season and into the monsoon season for the Southwest. We also like to look at this new drought index called the evaporative demand. It basically tells us how thirsty the environment has been, and you can see we really light up with the highest numbers, the worst drought indications across New Mexico and Arizona. So basically most of, or all of the SWIC Region 3 area is some of the worst in the country. And if you look at some of the changes over the last 2 weeks and 12 months, you can see again a lot of that focus is over our area. We have had some recent precipitation to our west, but you can see overall, if you look at the 12-month, it really is pretty bad across Southern California and all the way extending into New Mexico across the Southwest. So this is what the soils look like, and this is from early in March. This is the 1 year difference in soil moisture through a column from the surface to about 100 millimeters down. And you can see that all of these colors, being the oranges, are where we have lost moisture in the upper column of the soils over the course of the year due to the drought. So we've dried out the soils and don't have a lot of surface moisture for the fuels to grow. And this has big indications with the fine fuels, especially because they just don't have the moisture to grow. They're not deeply rooted. And so if you look at the outlooks for soil across the region through the end of April and then all the way through the end of June, you can see they highlight our region with continuing with big deficits for moisture in our soils. So now we go on to a recent look at what the snowpack looked like across the entire western United States. And we've been in an ENSO La Nina winter that usually kicks the storms to the north. And so you would anticipate that we'd have better snowpack as you move north towards the Pacific Northwest, and that's exactly what you see here. So this La Nina winter has lived up to what the forecast typically does, where it's drier down south. So if you look in New Mexico and Arizona, in those inset maps to the left, you'll see that we're well below average on snowpack down south, but as you move north, it gets to average and above. So the reason why we like to talk about La Nina versus El Nino is because it has huge implications on the cold season precipitation patterns across the United States. If we were in an El Nino, which we are not, it would move the jet stream south and move it across the Baja and the southwestern deserts and into and across our area, and we'd see more opportunity for precipitation through the winter, and that's when we typically get normal to above normal and cooler conditions across our region during the winter. But we've been in a La Nina down there on the bottom, and as you can see, that same jet stream gets kicked to the north, and it comes in over the Pacific Northwest. It leaves us on the south side of these systems, which is typically warm, dry, and breezy to windy, and so we've seen that. So we are in the La Nina pattern, and it has panned out the way that most La Nina winters tend to do. So when we talk about El Nino versus La Nina, we're looking at the sea surface ocean temperatures here along the equator across the Pacific, and we look in those regions, those little blocks right there with the arrows in them, not the Atlantic and not the northern Pacific, but just that one around the equator. We're looking for those sea surface temperatures to be either cooler than normal or warmer than normal. And here's what they look like here recently. This is March 21st. And you look in this little circled area and you can see a lot of blue, and that blue means the sea surface temperatures are below normal, which is typical of what you see or indicative of a La Nina episode. And there's another look with a monthly average from mid-Feb to mid-March, and you can see a lot of blue across the southern Pacific, the equatorial Pacific, indicating that La Nina episode that's in play right now. This is a track of those sea surface temperatures from last March to current, and that heavy dashed line in the middle is if the sea surface temperature was neutral or what it's supposed to be, there would be no difference from what it's supposed to be. So this is an anomaly, and so you can see with that line dipping below zero and going into that blue area, That's the track of the sea surface temperatures through this time showing below normal. But as you look on the far right, they are starting to warm back into that neutral zone. So if you look at the forecast going forward into our spring, right now in March we are in La Nina, so it's 98% that will continue to do that through the end of the month. But then as you move into April and May, you can see those chances really drop, and we go back to a neutral phase through summer, and then next fall or this upcoming fall, it's like maybe the chances start to improve to get what we call a double dip or double bounce La Nina, where it comes right back for another winter, which would not be good because that means maybe we get a second dry winter. And these are just what the forecasts are showing. Each one of those lines is a different forecast model running out through time as you go left to right. There's our fire season right there, and it just shows that we're probably going to be in neutral. There's a few outliers that go all the way to El Nino, but most of them stay weak La Nina to neutral, which is what we're thinking, that we'll go into neutral by the fall season. So now we'll start looking forward in time and look at the actual outlooks. So on the left-hand side, we're going to look at temperature, on the right, precip, and this is for the period March, April, May, and I know we'll be mostly through March when you see this, but you can see there's a big bullseye over us for both warmer than normal temperatures on the left, drier than normal conditions on the right. This is output from a forecast model called the climate forecast system, and it's a monthly look going through our fire season and into summer. Anywhere you see those warm colors, that's where the model thinks will be warmer than normal, and the darker the color, the warmer than normal they anticipate to be. And you can see there's really no cool colors on here, so the entire except for on the far western coast in April, but most of the country looks like it's either going to be warmer than normal or at normal, and same for us. And you look in July down there bottom right, you'll see some white showing up, and if I come up, you can see August. Both of those months are monsoon months, so if we get clouds and moisture, it should knock our temperatures down and make them closer to normal. That's what this model is thinking. Here we are looking at the same stuff, but here we're looking at charts created by forecasters at the Climate Prediction Center, and you can see how they are highlighting our part of the country as warmer than normal through July, and even extending that August through September. So the outlook basically in general for temperatures is to continue, and that's good agreement between those two systems. Now here we go over to the precipitation side and look at the outlooks there, and this again is the climate forecast system looking at precip, and there's actually a small hint of normal to above normal in April across the region here in the southwest. May looks drier than normal. June looks near normal, but then you get to July, and that's when we start the monsoon typically, and you can see there's a lot of green across the Four Corners area, and you follow that into July and August, and again you see hints of green, meaning above normal precipitation probabilities. So maybe we get a good or better monsoon than we did last year. At least it'd be hard to do that or be worse. Again, we move to the human created charts at the Climate Prediction Center, and we are seeing dry to equal chances for April, May, and June. Then we get to our monsoon month of July, August, September, and you can see that they are now starting to draw in some green across mainly Arizona and western New Mexico, where they're anticipating the probabilities for above normal precipitation with a good monsoon season. These charts with these green are new. I've been given this outlook since January, and with the previous charts, they did not have this. So this is new thinking on their part. So we can hope that that's true, and you're some of the first people to see me present these charts with the above normal anomalies over our area for the monsoon. So we go through the end of the year. On top is the temperatures. You can see strong probabilities for warmer than normal. On the bottom, this is now beyond what is our typical monsoon season. So they go back to taking out those green areas over our area and go back to EC, which is equal chances for either above, at normal, or below normal, meaning there's really no good strong indications for any of those outcomes. So you just have to assign each outcome 33%, and it makes it easy. So if we switch gears and look at what predictive services out of the SWIC GAC have produced with their outlook, you can see through June they also have red over our area for temperatures, meaning above normal probabilities. Our probabilities are for above normal temperatures. And on the bottom for their precipitation, you can see through June they also have us looking to be below normal for precipitation. And if you look at how they come up with their fire season assessment, they look at drought. And of course, we just showed we're severe to exceptional drought across most of the area. The fine fuels, that's actually one thing that plays in favor for fire, because we were so dry last year we didn't grow a fine fuels crop for the most part, so we're mostly below normal on our loading and continuity, and so that being the main carrier of fire, maybe fires will stay smaller because they won't be able to have a continuous run of fine fuel, so that might help. The seasonal temperature outlook and precipitation, we've been generally warmer than normal. We've had a couple of cold periods and wet periods, but overall we've been warmer and drier than normal going into fire season. So as we go into fire season and into the summer, of course we'll have an on and off active pattern into the mid-spring where the jet will dip down a couple of times, bring a few storms, but what they tend to do is just make them pass to our north. We get a little bit of precip out of them, not enough to make a big difference. And we usually stay on the drier and windier side of the systems. Then the monsoon, as you saw, expected to be timely and either normal to above normal on the precipitations. So here's what their outlooks look like for significant wildland fire potential. The red is above normal, and you can see starting to highlight West Texas, Oklahoma, eastern New Mexico, and parts of southeast Arizona. For March, of course, we're mostly through this. Go forward into April, we expand that above normal potential across southern Arizona and southern New Mexico. We go into May, and just keeps expanding across the area, and to June the entire states of Arizona, New Mexico, and much of West Texas is in that above normal significant fire. So the bottom line is that of course through the spring we'll get that up and down pattern where we'll see these systems come through every 2 to 4 or 5 days, mostly dry, mostly windy or to breezy, and maybe a bit of precipitation here and there, but really probably not enough to really abate any of the drought situation that we have that's pretty long term. So the result is expecting an earlier than normal start to large fire season. All right, that concludes the 2021 fire season outlook for southern New Mexico. I appreciate the time, and I hope you're safe this year. Thank you very much.